All right, let's dive right into one of the most foundational and, honestly, epic stories ever told, the Book of Genesis. It's a massive saga that spans generations, and it takes us all the way from the dawn of creation to a small family finding a new home in the mighty empire of Egypt.
So, here's the big question that really drives the whole narrative. How does this sweeping story about all of humanity suddenly zoom in and become the intimate story of just one single family? Let's trace that incredible journey together, from the universal to the deeply personal. Okay, here's how we're going to break it all down. We'll start at the very beginning with the world's early history. Then we'll narrow our focus to the patriarchs. That's Abraham, his son Isaac, and his grandson Jacob. From there, we'll follow Jacob's 12 sons, get into the wild story of Joseph, and finally see how it all comes together in Egypt. So our story kicks off quite literally, in the beginning. This first part is all about the big picture, the sweeping history of the early world, taking us from absolute perfection to a moment of total global reset. You know, the first few chapters of Genesis move at an absolutely breathtaking pace. First, you've got the creation of everything. Then we see this perfect life for humanity in the Garden of Eden, which is followed pretty quickly by their banishment. From that point, the world kind of spirals into chaos, which leads to the Great Flood, a moment meant to wash the earth clean. And it all culminates with humanity's defiant attempt to build the Tower of Babel, which leads to everyone being scattered across the globe. After all that devastation from the flood, God makes what's called a covenant, a really solemn promise, not just with Noah, but with all of creation. This verse, right here, it sets up a brand new, stable rhythm for the world. You know, predictable seasons, cycles, a reliable foundation for everything that's about to happen next. And this is where everything changes. The camera, you could say, does this massive zoom in. The wide-angle lens on the entire world suddenly focuses on one single man whose journey is about to change the course of history forever. So after the chaos and scattering at Babel, the whole narrative just pivots. Out of all the people on earth, God calls out one man, Abram. He's told to leave everything he knows, his home, his country, his relatives, and just start walking towards a land he's never even seen. This is the exact moment the universal story becomes a personal one. In return for his incredible faith, God makes this amazing three-part promise to Abram, whose name gets changed to Abraham. First, a specific piece of real estate, the land of Canaan. Second, the promise of more descendants than he could possibly count, as many as the stars in the sky. And third, the biggest promise of all, that through him and his family, the entire world would be blessed. So what exactly is a covenant? Well, it's way more than just a simple promise. Think of it like a binding, permanent treaty. It's a relationship where God makes these huge promises, and in return, people have a responsibility to be faithful. And this one was sealed with a physical sign, circumcision, to mark Abraham's descendants for all time. But you know, decades go by, and Abraham and his wife Sarah are still childless. Then, it's a miracle. In their old age, God gives them a son, Isaac. But the tension in the story hits an all-time high when God puts Abraham's faith to the ultimate test, telling him to sacrifice that very son. In an incredible act of obedience, Abraham goes to do it. And at the very last second, God provides a replacement, locking in the covenant because of Abraham's unshakable faith. So, with Abraham's faith proven, the promise has to get passed down to the next generation. But as we're about to see, the path of this covenant is never straightforward. Now it's Isaac's turn, which sets the stage for a classic story of sibling rivalry. The torch is passed to Isaac. He marries a woman named Rebecca, and after years of waiting, just like his parents, she has twins. But the conflict starts before they're even born. The Bible says they were literally struggling with each other in the womb. And these twins could not be more different. You got Esau, the firstborn. He's a rugged, hairy outdoorsman, a real hunter, and he's his dad's favorite. Then you have Jacob, the younger one. He's a quiet guy, a homebody, and totally his mother's favorite. This personality clash is basically a recipe for disaster. And all this tension boils over in two unbelievable moments. First, Jacob gets his starving brother Esau to trade his birthright, which was a huge deal. It meant getting the inheritance and leadership of the family for a bowl of soup. Later, with his mom's help, he literally disguises himself as his hairy brother to trick his blind old father and steal the powerful blessing that was meant for Esau. Those are the devastating words Isaac says to Esau when he finally realizes he's been tricked.
The thing is, a blessing like that, once it's given, can't be taken back. Jacob, whose name literally means he who supplants or deceiver, totally lives up to his name, and it creates this massive rift in the family that forces him to run for his life.
So now Jacob's a fugitive, and this is where he starts a whole new chapter. The trickster on the run is about to become the father of a huge family, the very foundation of what will become the nation of Israel. So Jacob runs to his mother's homeland, where he falls head over heels for his cousin Rachel. But in a wild twist, on his wedding night, he gets tricked himself. Her father swaps in the older sister, Leah. Jacob ends up marrying Rachel too, and this kicks off about 20 years of painful family drama and rivalry between the two sisters. Through his 2 wives and their 2 maids, Jacob ends up with 12 sons. And these guys, they're not just some big family. They are the founding fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel. That promise of a great nation that God gave to Abraham, it's now starting to take real human form.
But, the family dysfunction just keeps going. Jacob plays favorites. Big time. He openly adores Joseph, the first son from his favorite wife, Rachel. He even gives him this special, fancy coat, which just fuels the fire of jealousy in his 10 older brothers, until it reaches a boiling point.
And this brings us to one of the most incredible comeback stories ever told. Joseph's journey is an absolute roller coaster of betrayal, pain, and in the end, unbelievable triumph. Consumed by pure hatred, Joseph's brothers plot against him. They throw him into an empty pit and then sell him as a slave to a passing caravan. To cover their tracks, they tear up his special coat, dip it in goat's blood, and take it back to their father, letting him believe his favorite son was killed by a wild animal. In Egypt, things go from bad to worse. Joseph's integrity actually gets him into more trouble. When he rejects the advances of his master's wife, she falsely accuses him of assault. For that, he's thrown into Pharaoh's dungeon and just forgotten, left to rot for years. But Joseph has this amazing gift for interpreting dreams, and eventually word of this gift makes its way from the prison all the way to Pharaoh himself. He's pulled out of the dungeon, and not only does he interpret Pharaoh's dreams, he lays out a brilliant plan to save the entire nation. In a single day, Joseph goes from prisoner to prime minister. And this shows you just how brilliant his plan was. Pharaoh's dream pointed to 7 years of amazing harvests, followed by 7 years of devastating famine. Joseph's plan was simple but effective. During the good years, take 1/5 of all the grain and store it away. This incredible foresight would end up saving not just Egypt, but the whole region. So now, the stage is set for the grand finale. The very famine that Joseph prepared for is about to become the thing that forces his family's dark past to collide with its present. That severe famine hits Canaan hard. So Jacob sends his 10 older sons down to Egypt to buy food. And there, they're brought before this incredibly powerful Egyptian ruler who holds their lives in his hands. And they have no idea it's their own brother Joseph, who they haven't seen in over 20 years. After putting them through a series of dramatic tests to see if they've changed, Joseph just can't hold it in anymore. He reveals who he is, and his brothers are absolutely terrified. But instead of revenge, Joseph offers one of the most powerful statements of forgiveness in the entire Bible. He tells them that what they meant for evil, God used for good, to save their entire family. Joseph sends for his father Jacob and their entire extended family to come and live in Egypt. The total number of people who make that trip? 70. I know, it sounds like a small number, but this tiny clan is the future. They are the promise, being kept safe in a foreign land. And that's how the book of Genesis ends. It's full of hope, but also a lot of suspense. The family is safe, the promise is alive, but they are not in the land that was promised to Abraham. They are now guests in a foreign nation, a small family on the very brink of becoming the great nation God said they would be. So this little seed of 70 people is now planted in the fertile ground of Egypt, ready to grow. But the question that hangs in the air, the question that sets up the very next book, Exodus, is this: will this growing nation, now living as foreigners, ever make it back to the land promised to their ancestors? Hey, if this explainer helped you get a handle on the epic story of Genesis, do us a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to our channel Through the Bible. We post new content every single day, and we'd love to hear from you. So drop a comment below and let us know what book or topic you'd like us to explore next. Thanks for watching.